Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this shirt dress that I'm wearing, and if that's something that you would like to see, definitely keep watching. It promises to be another fun and detailed tutorial, and I hope by the time we're done, you'll enjoy this video as much as I enjoyed recording it. Thank you so much, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. To make your shirt dress, you need the following items. You need your measuring tape. You'd also need your seam ripper, and your seam ripper is basically used to open up or cut open your buttonhole when you make them. You need some buttons, and I've got this ones here that I will use for my shirt dress. You need your pencil, however for the purpose of this video I'll be making use of my Sharpie. You need your tailor's chalk or fabric marker. You need your fabric scissors. You need your hip curve, and if you would like to shop your hip curve or any of these tools, do check out the links that I have in the description bar. You need your pattern master, and you guys know that this is one of my favorite tools because of how multifunctional it is. You need about a yard to a yard and a half of Ankara fabric, and then you need about a yard to a yard and a half of your striped shirt fabric. You need your pattern paper. And of course, you need collar stay. I don't know why I forgot to put it here, but you need your collar stay. Start off by drawing a horizontal line, which will be the shoulder line or the top line. Then go ahead and mark out the vertical measurement. So you want to start off by marking out the shoulder to bust measurement, and then 2 inches above that you want to mark the shoulder to the armhole measurement. Then you want to go ahead and mark the shoulder to the waist measurement as well. Starting from the waist, mark out the waist to hip measurement using the formula being shown on the screen. So basically you want to divide the hip measurement by 4, and then you want to take away 1 inch, and then you will have your waist to hip measurement. Square out all these points and then label appropriately. So basically from the top you would have the shoulder line, the armhole line, the bust line, the waistline, the hip line, and of course the hemline. On the shoulder and armhole lines, mark half the back measurement plus 0.5 inch ease horizontally. Connect the marks on the shoulder and the armhole lines with a vertical line as shown. On the shoulder line, mark 3 inches to 3¼ of an inch horizontally. This will be for the neck width. Then go ahead and mark the front and the back neck depth. So for the front neck depth, you want to mark about 3 inches deep, and then for the back neck depth, you want to keep it about an inch deep. After marking out the necklines, go ahead and draw in the back and the front neckline. And as you can see, I make use of my pattern master to do that. So for the back neck, I make use of the inner curve, and then for the front neck, I make use of the outer curve of my pattern master. Mark 1 inch vertically on the armhole depth line, and then connect it back to the neck width point with a slant line as shown. Draw in the armhole curve, and as you guys can see, I make use of my pattern master again, which is why I called it a multifunctional tool. On the armhole and bust lines, go ahead and mark 1/4 of the bust measurement plus ½ an inch for ease, and then 1 inch for the sewing allowance. On the waistline, mark 1/4 of the waist measurement plus 1½ inches for ease, and then 1 inch for the sewing allowance. And then on the hip line, go ahead and mark 1/4 of the hip measurement plus ½ an inch for ease, and then 1 inch for the sewing allowance. You basically want to take whatever measurement you have on the hip line all the way down to the hem of your dress, and then go ahead and connect the points like so. So because my paper was just about 2-3 inches shorter than my actual length, I went ahead to add some more paper to it, and then I now was able to measure out my actual length and square out the points where I wanted my hem to be. The measurement that I have on my hip line is the same measurement that I have on my hem line. Alright guys, just to clarify, this pattern was drafted with the side seam allowance as well as the armhole allowance, which is why when we're drafting it, I kept on saying add 1 inch for the sewing allowance. So I'm going ahead to add 1 inch at the hem, and this will be for the hem allowance, as well as 1/2 inch at the top of the shoulder for the shoulder allowance. So basically, every part of this pattern has its allowance. However, the neckline doesn't have the allowance yet. While cutting on fabric, we'll add the allowance to the neckline. So go ahead and cut out the dress pattern as shown, and be careful to only cut out the back neckline. You don't want to cut out the front neckline yet. At this point, you should have the shoulder, the armhole line, the bust line, the waistline, the hip line, and the hem line. The next thing to do is to decide where you want your striped fabric and then where you want your Ankara pattern. So for me, I decided to have my striped fabric just below the midpoint of the armhole. So I went ahead to square out with my set square, and then I decided to have the striped fabric again just about 3 or 4.5 inches below the hip line. So I basically squared out the point as well. So after deciding where you want to have your striped fabric and where you want to be Ankara, and guys, you can basically do any pattern that you want, that's absolutely up to you. However, for this particular dress, this is how I came up with it. So after deciding, I just went ahead to label the part so that I don't get it confused. So from the top, I have the striped fabric, I have my Ankara, and then I have my striped fabric at the bottom. And just to give your shirt dress a little bit of, extra sauce and all of that, I went ahead to curve the hem from the side seam area. So basically, you want to work your way from the side to the center of the, of the bottom, and then you just want to draw a slight curve. So I use freehand, and then I just, smoothing it out with my pattern master again. After doing all of this, go ahead and cut up your pieces so that you have 3 different pieces, and the hem or the bottom piece will have like a slight curve. So to start cutting, we're going to be starting with the Ankara piece. You want to fold your Ankara fabric into 4 so that you have like a folded edge on 2 separated edges. Then go ahead and pin the Ankara pattern onto the fabric, making sure the center back, which is the folded edge in this case, aligns with the edge of this paper. So guys, because this is a shirt dress, basically the folded edge will be the center back, so the center back will be cut on fold, and then the separated edges will be the center front. So go ahead and mark out the sewing allowances of 1 inch on the center front. So basically you're marking from the center back outwards, and then 1/2 inch at the bottom and 1/2 inch at the top. Afterwards, go ahead and cut up the Ankara piece, cutting exactly on the paper or by the paper at the side seam. Also, to cut out the other 2 pieces that are from striped fabric, you want to go ahead and fold your striped fabric into 4 just like you did the Ankara, and then you want to place your paper on it, making sure the edge of the paper aligns with the folded edge, which is the center back. So go ahead and pin it in place. So we're starting with the one which is at the hem, and then you want to measure 1/2 inch at the top and then 1 inch on the center front, and then you want to cut out the piece as shown. Lastly, Pin the last piece of fabric onto the striped fabric, making sure that the center back, which is the folded edge, aligns with the edge of the paper. Then go ahead and mark out 1/2 inch at the bottom and then 1 inch at the center front. So basically, like I said, you don't need to add to the top because of the shoulder allowance, which has been added on paper. However, you do need to add to the neckline. So go ahead and mark your 1/2 inch allowance all around the neckline and then cut as shown. Alright guys, just to clarify, when you cut like this, you're cutting out both the back piece and the front pieces. The back piece is the one on fold, while the front piece is the one that has like the 1 inch extension. So basically, to cut out the front neckline, you want to carefully unpin the neckline and fold away the center back. Then with your paper scissors, you want to cut out the front neckline just like I'm doing, and then carefully pin that back to the front piece, making sure not to have the back piece in the way. After that, mark out the sewing allowance of 1/2 inch to the front neckline and then cut out the front neckline, making sure you are only cutting the front pieces, guys. You need to be absolutely careful when you're doing this. So far so good. These are all the pieces that we've cut, and this is what they look like when you put them next to each other. Your dress should look like this after joining. So go ahead and notch all the pieces that you have. You want to notch the centers of all the pieces that you have at the top and at the bottom. Carefully unpin all the back pieces, and this is so that we can start joining the pieces together and we can start the sewing process. Starting with the striped piece of fabric at the top, pin the center of the striped piece at the top to the center of the top of the Ankara, making sure the right sides of the fabric are facing each other. Then go ahead and pin your way outwards towards the side. Afterwards, mark out the sewing allowance of 1/2 inch. You also want to pin the bottom striped piece of fabric to the bottom of the Ankara, so you want to work your way from the notch center all the way to the sides as well. Pin into place and mark out the sewing allowance of 1/2 inch. Afterwards, go ahead and sew both joinings together. After sewing the pieces together, this is what the back piece looks like, and as you can see, it is now whole and your dress should start to come together. So next, we're going to be joining the front pieces together in the same fashion. So you want to make sure that you do it in such a way that it doesn't confuse you guys. So carefully open up the front pieces, and the way I've done it, I've got the center front on opposite sides, and then you want to carefully place the pieces where they should be and pin them in place so that the right side of the striped fabric is facing the right side of the Ankara, and you want to do that for the bottom piece as well. After sewing the front pieces, this is what it should look like. So for me guys, I went ahead to top stitch the back piece in place just to give it that, professional look that shirts have. However, this is completely optional. To join the sides, place the back piece on the table so that the right side is facing you. Then go ahead and place the front pieces on it so that the right sides of both fabric are facing each other. You also want to check that the joining at the hem aligns, and then go ahead and pin the sides in place. Mark out the sewing allowance of 1 inch at the sides, and then go ahead and sew the sides together, making sure to stop about 1 inch to 1.5 inches towards the end of the hem. And this is so that we can have room to curve or to bend the curve at the hem. So guys, you want to repeat this on the other side as well. Afterwards, pin the shoulders together and then mark out the sewing allowance of 1/2 inch. Go ahead and sew the shoulders as well as the sides. You also want to repeat this on the other side. After sewing the shoulders and the sides, this is what the dress looks like, and as you can see, I didn't sew the sides completely to the hem so that I can have room to hem the dress. So guys, at this point, the next thing to do is to take the vertical measurements that you have from the front neckline all the way to the hem of the dress, and then you want to go ahead and add about 5 inches to the measurement that you've taken. So you want to measure from the front neckline all the way to the hem of the dress, and for me, I have about 35.5 inches. Go ahead and cut out 2 strips of fabric that are about 3.5 inches wide and then longer than the measurements that you took from the neckline to the hem. So for me, the measurement I took is 35.5 inches, and my fabric strips are about 39 inches long. Starting from the wrong side of the dress, pin one of the button stand strips to the wrong side of the center front of the dress. You want to make sure that the edges of the dress and the edge of the button stand align, and then you want to make sure that the right side of the button stand is against the wrong side of the dress. After pinning all the way down, go ahead and mark out the sewing allowance of 1 inch and then go ahead and sew in place. After sewing the button stand to the inside of the dress, this is what it looks like after it's been ironed. So now you want to flip your fabric over to the right side of the dress, and then you want to fold over the button stand as shown. So basically what I'm doing is folding in 1/2 inch at the edge of the button stand and then folding over 1 inch so that I can top stitch that in place. You want to check that your button stand is even all the way through, so you should have a width of 1 inch, and then you want to go ahead and repeat this on the other side of the center front as well. After doing this, go ahead and top stitch in place by sewing neatly on the right side of the fabric. Alright guys, so after sewing the button stand on both center front pieces, this is what it looks like, and as you can see, I tried as much as possible to sew it neatly. Go ahead and cut off the excess of the button stand. It's always better to have excess than for you to have it short, and then go ahead and arrange the dress just like the dress should be. Next, you need to hem the ends by folding in 1/2 inch twice, and because it's a curve, it is slightly tricky. So what I always do is I just notch where I stopped sewing the side seam at, and then go ahead and hem from there. It makes my work a lot easier and faster. Pin the button stand on each other so that your dress is well arranged, and then go ahead and take the measurement of the armhole so that you can cut the shirt sleeves out. To cut the sleeves, fold your stripe fabric into 4 as shown. And because the edge of my fabric isn't straight, I went ahead to draw a top line just to keep my fabric straight and in place. Starting at the very top, mark out the desired sleeve length vertically. So for instance, if your sleeve length is 24 and you want to add cuff to your shirt and you want your cuff to be about 3 inches wide, you want to go ahead and mark out 21 inches plus half an inch allowance. So go ahead and mark out the desired sleeve length vertically minus the cuff length that you want. At the top, mark out the armhole measurements that was taken off the dress horizontally. And then from that point, mark down 5 inches vertically as shown. Next, draw in the S-shaped armhole curve. Just beneath the S-shaped armhole curve, go ahead and mark out half the upper arm measurement as well as the forearm measurement, and then connect the points as shown. You'll notice that this isn't a straight sleeve, it is slightly fitted, and that's because it is a shirt. However, it is not too tight. If you'd like to see a more detailed tutorial on how I draft my sleeves, let me know in the comment section and I will try as much as possible to explain and take my time with it. Cut out the sleeves and then go ahead and notch the center of the sleeve crown as well as the center of the ends of the sleeve. To cut out my sleeve cuff, I decided to change the grain of my fabric. So basically, I've been cutting my fabric so that the stripes are vertical. However, for the cuff, I'm cutting it so that the cuff is, or the stripes on the cuff rather, are horizontally placed. To cut out the sleeve cuff, go ahead and fold your fabric into 4 as shown. The first thing you want to do is you want to determine the measurement of your sleeve ends, and for me the measurement I have is about 5 inches. However, it is important to note that your sleeve ends are on fold and your cuff is not on fold, so you will need to double whatever measurement that you took there. Next, you want to go ahead and determine the height of your sleeve cuff. I went with a height of 3.5 inches. However, you do remember that your sleeve cuff is currently on fold, so when you open it up, if you measure 3.5 inches, it will be 7 inches wide. So I've gone ahead to measure mine like that, 3.5 inches high, and then I'm measuring the width as 10 inches. So I have a rectangular piece of fabric that is 10 inches wide and 7 inches long. If you would like to give your sleeve cuff a more professional look, go ahead and iron on some interfacing onto the sleeve cuff. So I ironed on some interfacing onto mine, and then I went ahead to notch the center. So I opened it up and then notched the center at the top and at the bottom. You also want to repeat this for the other cuff as shown. To sew the cuff to the sleeves, go ahead and match the center of the cuff to the center of the sleeves. You want to make sure the right side of the cuff is against the wrong side of the sleeves, and then you want to pin from the center all the way to the sides. Afterwards, mark out the sewing allowance of 1/2 inch and then go ahead and sew the cuff to the sleeves on the 1/2 inch sewing allowance. Next, you want to bend over the cuff as shown and then top stitch onto the right side of the sleeves. After sewing the cuff to the sleeves, this is what the sleeves look like now. As you can see, the length of the sleeve has increased. Go ahead and fold the sleeves into two and then pin the sides as shown. Mark out the sewing allowance of 1 inch and then sew in place at the sides. And this is what the sleeves look like after sewing. Fix the sleeves to the armhole of the dress by matching the side seam of the sleeves to the side seam on the dress. You want to pin that into place, and then you want to go ahead and find the notch on the sleeve crown on the sleeve and pin that onto the shoulder line of the dress. You want to make sure the right sides of the sleeve and the dress are touching each other, and if it's convenient for you, you want to pin from the inside. Go ahead and pin the rest of the sleeves onto the armhole, making sure to ease in the sleeves while pinning and while sewing. After pinning in place, go ahead and sew on a 1/2 inch sewing allowance all around. And like I said earlier, you want to ease in the sleeves onto the armhole without forming pleats. Alright guys, so at this point the dress is nearly finished and this is what the dress looks like. So the next thing to do is to move on to the collar, and to do that you want to measure the neck circumference. However, you do want to skip the button stand. So as you can see, I start my measurement after the button stand and I carefully measure all around the neck circumference until I get to the beginning of the second button stand. To draft the collar pattern, decide the height that you want the collar stand to be and then mark the height at the edge of the paper. So for me, I went with a height of 1.5 inches and I just marked 1.5 inches at the edge of my paper. Square out the points as shown and then mark out half the neck circumference of the dress. So for instance, if the neck circumference of the dress that you took is 14 inches, you want to mark half of that as 7 inches and then you want to square up as shown. On the bottom curved line, mark 1 inch outwards from the vertical line and then connect it back to the top line as shown. You want to connect it back to the top line with a curve, and the reason why I went with 1 inch is because my button stand is 1 inch. So if your button stand is 2 inches, you want to mark 2 inches. However, for most button stands that I see, it's usually 1 inch wide. Moving back to the edge of the paper, you want to measure 1.5 inches above the previous line that you have there, and then you want to square out as well. So now we're moving on to the collar fall. Blend the new line with a downward curve back to the top of the collar stand as shown. From the new line, mark 1.5 or 2 inches upwards depending on the desired collar length that you want, and then square out. Label appropriately as collar stand and collar fall, and also label the center back, which will be the part that is unfold while cutting. Raise the collar fall by 1/2 inch at the top as shown, and then blend back with a slant line. Cut out the collar. Cut out 2 pieces of the collar fall and 2 pieces of the collar stand as well. The center back of both pieces should be placed on the folded edge of the fabric, and then you want to measure 1/2 inch sewing allowance all around. After marking out the sewing allowances, go ahead and cut out the collar pieces as shown. Cut out one piece of collar stay or one piece of collar interfacing for the collar stand and the collar fall as well. After cutting up the collar interfacing, notch the bottom of the collar fall and the top of the collar stand. This is so that you can identify what side matches up with what side. Then go ahead and iron the collar interfacing onto the collar pieces. Unpin both pieces of collar fall and then pin the pieces together so that the right sides are facing each other. You want to sew around the top area and the sides. However, the sides with the notch, which is the bottom, you want to leave unsewn. Mark out the sewing allowance of 1/2 inch on the collar fall and sew as shown. After sewing the collar fall, trim off as much as possible of the seam allowance and then go ahead and turn inside out and iron in place. Notch the middle of the collar fall as shown and then go ahead and sew the collar fall to the collar stand. To do this, you want to notch the center of the two collar stand pieces and then you want to place it so that the collar fall is sandwiched between the two collar stand pieces. Be sure to take note of the right side, or the top side rather, of the collar stand pieces. Pin all 3 pieces together starting at the notch. You want to make sure that the collar fall is in between the two collar stand pieces and the right sides of the collar stand are facing each other. You want to work your way from the middle and pin your way outwards onto the end of the collar stand. Mark out the sewing allowance of 1/2 inch all around as shown and then go ahead and sew on the 1/2 inch sewing allowance. After sewing, trim off as much of the seam allowance as possible and then go ahead and turn the collar stand to the right side. Alright guys, so at this point, this is what the collar looks like, and as you can see, the dress is nearly finished because the collar is nearly ready. So if you haven't found the center of the neck circumference, go ahead and find the center and make a notch on the center of the neck circumference. Afterwards, go ahead and pin one layer of the collar stand to the inside of the dress. You basically want to match the notch on the collar stand to the notch on the neck circumference, and then you want to pin the collar stand to the inside of the dress, working your way from the notch all the way to the button stand on the dress. If you cut your collar correctly, the end of the collar stand and the end of the button wrap of the dress should match like this. It should be an exact fit. Sew the collar stand to the inside of the dress on a 1/2 inch sewing allowance. After sewing the collar to the inside of the dress on one side, this is what the collar should look like. So the next thing to do is to top stitch the collar close. You basically want to lay your dress flat on the right side, and then you want to bend 1/2 inch on the other collar stand and then top stitch it as shown. You want to make sure that your top stitching line is on the other same line that you had from the previous collar stand that you sewed onto the dress. I hope that's not confusing. Alright guys, so after top stitching the collar stand close, this is what your collar should look like, and as you can see, it looks really neat. I went ahead to top stitch my collar stand all around just to give it a professional finish, and at this point guys, your shirt dress is literally done and ready to be worn. So the next thing to do is to fix the buttons onto the button stand as well as make the buttonholes, and if you would like to see how I do that, I have a video tutorial showing you how to make a buttonhole with a regular zigzag sewing machine. To check out the video, click on the link in the iCard above as well as in the description bar below. And guys, that is it now. We are now done with this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it was worth your while. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to share and don't forget to leave your comments, suggestions and feedback in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.